So there's been an important development today in the case of the Huawei executive Meng Wanzhou, which has dragged on now for well over a year in Vancouver. Basically, the development is that her extradition request has been refused. So go read out a bit of the CTV article, and then I want to talk about something that particularly concerns me about this. Um, the headline is China-Canada divide widens after Meng ruling as Beijing denounces decision, and the report is by Mike Blanchfield. Um, so, Ottawa. The bitter political divide between Canada and China grew wider Wednesday after a British Columbia judge issued a ruling that went against the stern demands of the People's Republic. China angrily denounced the decision by Justice Heather Holmes in the extradition case of Huawei executive Meng Wanzhou, who is wanted on fraud charges in the United States, as it called once more for her immediate release. Canada held firm, calling for the release of its two arbitrarily detained Canadian men, and said it would continue to respect the independence of its judiciary from politics. The upshot, said several analysts, is a deepening of a crisis in Sino-Canadian relations that would force the government to continue to seek allies in a dispute that has put Canada in the middle of a fight between two geopolitical giants. Holmes ruled the allegation against Meng that she lied to American banks to get Huawei business around sanctions against Iran could constitute a crime in Canada, so her extradition case continues and she will remain in the court's hands on bail in a luxury Vancouver home. Michael Kovrig, an ex-diplomat working for the International Crisis Group, and Michael Spavor, an entrepreneur who did business in North Korea, have been in Chinese prisons with no access to lawyers or their families since they were detained 9 days after Meng's arrest by the Royal Canadian Mounted Police in December 2018. A statement by the Chinese embassy in Ottawa again called for Meng's release and expressed strong dissatisfaction with Holmes' ruling. The United States and Canada, by abusing their bilateral extradition treaty and arbitrarily taking forceful measures against Ms. Meng Wanzhou, gravely violated the lawful rights and interests of the said Chinese citizen, the statement said. The purpose of the United States is to bring down Huawei and other Chinese high-tech companies, and Canada has been acted in the process as an accomplice of the United States. The whole case is entirely a grave political incident. Foreign Affairs Minister Francois-Philippe Champagne said the decision was but one step in an independent legal process, one that is transparent for Meng. The Government of Canada's top priority is and remains securing the release of Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor, who have been arbitrarily detained for over 500 days, the minister said in a statement. And I won't read out the rest of the article, I'll put in a link on the video. Well, I'll read out the last paragraph. David Mulrooney, a former Canadian ambassador to China, said the People's Republic faces growing challenges in the international stage that are to Canada's disadvantage. Its ongoing dispute with the United States, the growing pressure on it over its handling of COVID-19, and the military standoff with India. Even China can only manage so many crises at a time. There's another dilemma for Canada, which is that they're receiving PPE equipment from China, and that kind of gives Beijing a blackmail tool. I really think that countries should, with coronavirus, they need to really focus on getting PPE from countries other than China, because what is Beijing going to do? They'll just threaten to not send this life-saving equipment. Okay, a lot of China critics are celebrating this because they're saying, well, we're not caving in. This woman's being held to account um, for her purported fraud. But I'm not so optimistic because I think what is going to happen here is China's going to respond angrily, and their retaliation will be entirely on the two Michaels. These two men held without lawyers. I mean, what Canada says is absolutely true. It's arbitrary detention. And it is very, very striking. And this is something Chinese nationalists should consider and feel shame about, is that while Meng Wanzhou enjoys basically house arrest, but in a luxurious apartment. Well, actually, I don't even know if it's house arrest. I understood she had the freedom of the city of Vancouver. But the point is, she has due process. She has humane conditions. She has access to a lawyer. She even had nationalistic protesters on her behalf. Contrast that to these two men who haven't seen their families for well over a year, who have no access to lawyers, who are being held without trial, probably in pretty uncomfortable Chinese prisons. I don't think the Chinese regime would be stupid enough to torture them, but I imagine these guys are going through hell, every single day, wondering how long they will be there for. If China maintains that they are guilty of something, give them a trial. What's so odious and vile and thuggish about the Chinese regime is they're basically using these two men as pawns because they feel that their nationals being treated unfairly. So they're arbitrarily detaining these two guys on very flimsy charges. It's simple. If China believes that these two men are guilty of something, give them a trial. Punish them even if the evidence is presented. But the fact that they have been held arbitrarily without trial just shows how filthy the Chinese legal system is. It's entirely in total the Chinese regime. Contrast the two countries, and I challenge Chinese nationalists to claim that they have a more fair system or a more transparent system. They will fail. And I really think that we need to be backing the Canadians on this strongly. I mean, it might be that the Americans are pushing this as a way to get China. I have no strong views on what Miss Meng is actually charged with. I don't know if she's guilty or not. She might be innocent, but at least she is getting due process. She has a lawyer. She has comfortable conditions. You can be absolutely sure that in her luxury facility in Vancouver, she is not going to be getting inhumane conditions. The situation for the two Canadians, on the other hand, in China, it's well documented how China treats foreigners in detention, and it's pretty shameful. Of course, they treat many Chinese citizens like that as well. But this is a country that has zero respect for human rights. They have zero respect for due process. In China, if the government wants you to be guilty, you are guilty. There's no independent judiciary. It's all controlled by the communist regime. So I, I feel really bad for these guys because I think it's going to prolong the detention and it puts the Trudeau government in a very difficult position. Because what China is arrogantly ignoring is that the Trudeau government, it's a parliamentary system. Trudeau can't just go in and demand the court does this or that. It doesn't work like that. The judiciary is independent. And I'm not going to criticize the judge either. But it may be that the only solution to get these two Canadians out of China is to do some sort of prisoner exchange. It may mean that Meng Wanzhou might be guilty and she might be escaping justice, and of course the Americans will really not be happy about that. I also think, though, having said all this, I also think the United States needs to be considerate of their neighbours to the north and considerate of the plight of these two Canadians. Trump administration may not care, but it would be a good neighbourly gesture to say, look, we understand what China's doing here. They're holding your people basically hostage. That's essentially what it is, because they haven't been given a trial. Um, so maybe we can work some sort of arrangement with this, i.e., have some sort of situation where it's brought more between the United States and China directly, rather than Canada being kind of punished as the country in the middle. I mean, of course, it's not a neutral country; it's a Western country, and China is pretty much at loggerheads with every Western country right now and much of the world. This might be the point, actually, in modern times that China's popularity is at an all-time low. Its reputation around the world is absolutely slumped. How does it respond with this sort of thuggish behaviour? I mean, they claim that the two Canadians are being treated well. Prove it. Prove it. Give them due process. Give them a trial. 500 days is an agonizingly long time. I mean, I feel for these two men, but I also feel profoundly for the families. They must be going through hell. And like I said, I don't think China would be stupid enough to actually, for example, torture them as they would with domestic dissidents, because that would just be, say one of them died, for example, even the arrogant Xi Jinping regime couldn't risk that. Um, because they want their citizen back. Thing is, China uses typical bully boy tactics. They think the way they're going to get Meng Wanzhou extradited is by, using these Canadian citizens as pawns. But my challenge to any Chinese nationalists who are watching this, and you're thinking, oh, well, look at how Canada treats our citizens. Compare the two systems. She has had a trial. She has access to her lawyers. She's had her due process. Whether or not you like the decision, she's had her due process. The two Canadians haven't had their due process. So do not even try to say that it's comparable. China has once again shown its ugly, and by China I'm talking about the communist regime, its ugly, ugly lack of respect for basic human dignity and human liberty. And this is yet another reminder, on top of the previous video I mentioned about the situation in Hong Kong, of why the West really, 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 really needs to change track on China and start getting assertive. I would even go so far as to say we should start warning our citizens not to go there. And people might say I'm a hypocrite. I was there twice, and they were good experiences. But really, the way things are right now, I think the Chinese state will just pick up any Westerner they find and try to pin something on them with minimal evidence. Maybe not ordinary people, but any Westerner who has some sort of diplomatic background or maybe military background. I think anyone. Let's say, for example, you have a Western tourist who is a former soldier. He might find himself targeted simply because of his background. He might be totally innocent. She might be totally innocent. But the way the Chinese regime is acting, it's disgusting, actually. But it just shows what a rogue regime it is. China demands respect on the international stage, yet constantly violates international laws. It's infuriating. But the thing with these sort of situations is Trudeau cannot, not that it's in his nature anyway, but he can't just bombastically demand their release because then China will just get even more hard line. It's always a very difficult thing for leaders and governments in these sort of situations. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, these two Canadian men are being held hostage by the Chinese regime.